Cheech and Chong did something no protest, politician, or court case could do. They made America laugh at the thing it feared most. And fear is a powerful weapon, but it has one fatal weakness. It cannot survive laughter. For almost 40 years, America was trained to be terrified of weed, taught that one puff could turn honest kids into maniacs and killers. And the thing that finally broke that fear wasn't a protest, a politician, or a court case. It was two broke comedians, a Mexican-American draft dodger and a Chinese-Canadian guitarist from Motown, telling jokes. And those jokes did what no movement had managed to do. They made an entire country stop being afraid. This is the story of Cheech and Chong, the duo that gave the world Pedro and Man, Dave's Not Here, and a weed van that's now in the Library of Congress. Now, to understand what these two were up against, you have to understand the fear machine they were born into. In 1936, a church group financed a movie that became known as Reefer Madness, a film that told Americans marijuana was public enemy number one, showing clean-cut teenagers smoking a joint and then spiraling into car crashes, murder, and insanity. And that wasn't fringe stuff. It was part of a full government propaganda push, led by the country's first drug czar, Harry Anslinger, that helped pass the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937, effectively banning marijuana nationwide. For decades after that, the official image of weed in America was pure terror. Keep that government fear machine in mind, because half a century later, it comes back for one of our two heroes personally. So, who are these two guys, you may ask? Richard Marin, better known as Cheech, was born in 1946 in South Central Los Angeles. And here's the first great irony of this story. His father was an LAPD cop. The nickname Cheech came from an uncle who took one look at the newborn and said he looked like a chicharron, a little fried pork rind. Cheech grew up sharp, studied English in college, and when the Vietnam draft came calling in the late 60s, he did what a lot of young guys did. He headed north to Canada, telling people his dream was to become a potter. Meanwhile, Tommy Chong was already living a whole other life. Born in 1938 in Edmonton, Canada, to a Chinese father and a Scottish-Irish mother, Chong dropped out of high school to play guitar, and he was genuinely good. His soul band, Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers, got signed to Motown, where Chong co-wrote a real top 30 hit. And here's a detail that sounds made up but isn't. That same band discovered a young family act from Indiana called the Jackson 5 and brought them to Motown. So, before the weed jokes, Tommy Chong helped hand the world to Michael Jackson. And in 1969, though some accounts say 68, these two collided in Vancouver in the least glamorous place imaginable. Chong was running a scrappy improv troupe out of a strip club connected to his family, doing what he called hippie burlesque, and Cheech, who had drifted into town writing for a music magazine, got brought in as a performer. The act itself was born half by accident. As the story goes, the two got sent out one night just to warm up the crowd before a band, and they got so many laughs, the band never made it to the stage. They put Cheech's name first because it simply sounded better, and Chong loved to joke that Cheech was the first Mexican he had ever met. A Chicano lowrider character named Pedro and a burned-out hippie known simply as Man. That was the whole act. Two harmless dudes looking for their next joint. They moved down to Los Angeles around 1970, where they got discovered by Lou Adler, the legendary producer fresh off Carole King's Tapestry, and their debut album dropped in 1971 and gave the world the immortal Dave's Not Here bit, a routine so simple and so perfectly observed, it became the defining catchphrase of an entire counterculture movement, and the records just kept getting bigger from there. 1972 brought Big Bamboo, an album literally packaged as a giant pack of rolling papers with an oversized paper tucked inside, and it shot to number 2 on the Billboard charts and became the best-selling comedy album of its era. 1973 brought Los Cochinos, which also hit number 2 and won them the Grammy for Best Comedy Recording, featuring a novelty song called Basketball Jones with George Harrison of the Beatles, Billy Preston, and Carole King all playing on it. Read that again. A stoner comedy bit, backed by a Beatle. They toured like a rock band, opened for the Rolling Stones, and their records ended up hidden in millions of teenage bedrooms across America, usually right up until somebody's mom found them. But records were just the warm-up, because in 1978, they made the movie that changed everything. Getting it made was a war in itself. Adler later joked about the pitch. Try walking into Paramount and selling a marijuana movie starring a Mexican and a Chinese-Irish Canadian. The studio put up around $1 million, and when the boss, Michael Eisner, saw a rough cut, he hated it and pulled the plug on the extra $800,000 needed to finish. So Adler paid to finish it out of his own pocket, and only after test audiences went absolutely wild, which of course led the studio to come crawling back. And that movie was called Up in Smoke, the story of Pedro and Man unknowingly driving a van made entirely out of weed up from Tijuana while a bumbling narc chases them. The critics tore it apart. One famous reviewer gave it half a star, but the audience made it a monster. Over $44 million in America alone off that tiny budget, one of the biggest hits of 1978, and over 100 million worldwide. It didn't just succeed, it launched the stoner film genre as a formal category of cinema, basically becoming the grandfather of every weed comedy that came after it. And in the ultimate mic drop, in 2024, the Library of Congress added Up in Smoke to the National Film Registry, officially preserving the Weed Van movie as an American cultural treasure. The sequels rolled out through the early 80s. Next movie, Nice Dreams, which had cameos from Pee Wee Herman and Timothy Leary, Things Are Tough All Over, Still Smokin', filmed in Amsterdam, and The Corsican Brothers, which was their one attempt at a movie with no weed in it, and it flopped so hard, it basically proved what the audience actually came for. Now here's the heart of this whole video, because while America was laughing, something bigger was happening. Remember, the country had spent 40 years being told weed turns people into monsters. Cheech and Chong's stoners weren't monsters. They were sweet, slow, harmless, and lovable. Guys whose biggest crime was forgetting where they parked. Chong himself put it perfectly, saying the thing that made Cheech and Chong dangerous is that people could see they were harmless. And Cheech called them middle-of-the-road dopers, saying, "We represent the norm. You just don't realize it yet." And the numbers from that exact era are striking. When they started in 1969, only 12% of Americans supported legalizing weed. And by 1977, that number had more than doubled to 28%. The share of Americans who admitted even trying weed jumped from 4% to 24% in that same window. Weed use among high school seniors peaked in 1978, and 11 states decriminalized marijuana between 1973 and 1978. Now, I've got to be honest with you here. Nobody can prove 2 comedians caused all that. They were riding the counterculture movement wave as much as driving it, and the researchers credit a lot of forces. But nobody was a bigger, friendlier, more mainstream face for weed in that decade than these two. And every stoner film you've ever loved, Friday, Half-Baked, Harold and Kumar, Pineapple Express, walks a trail they cut first. And not everyone was laughing because Up in Smoke was banned in apartheid South Africa out of fear it would make kids smoke. But like a lot of great duos, they couldn't survive their own success. And in 1985, it fell apart. It wasn't one blow-up. It was a slow grind over ego and control. Chong had directed 4 of their movies and, by his own later admission, became a bit of a megalomaniac about it, while Cheech felt trapped in the stoner box and wanted more. The breaking point came over a Springsteen parody Cheech made called Born in East L.A., which he turned into his own movie in 1987. That film became a landmark of Chicano cinema, a cult classic about an American wrongly deported to Mexico. And that movie was way bigger than just a comedy. It kicked the door open for Chicano stories to finally be broadcasted in mainstream Hollywood. From there, Cheech built a huge second act, voicing Banzai, the hyena in The Lion King, and Ramon in the Cars movies, acting in Tin Cup and Desperado, and spending 6 seasons as Don Johnson on the cop show Nash Bridges. Chong's road was rockier, but a whole new generation ended up falling in love with him as Leo, the lovable burnout on that 70s show. And then the fear machine I told you about at the start came back, and this part of the story is genuinely hard to believe. In February of 2003, DEA agents and federal law enforcement raided Tommy Chong's home as part of something called Operation Pipe Dreams, a nationwide sting organized under Attorney General John Ashcroft, targeting companies that sold bongs and pipes. This operation cost over $12 million and used 2,000 law enforcement officers to go after glass. Chong's crime was financing and promoting a bong company that his son Paris actually ran, and to even charge him, agents had to repeatedly pressure the company into shipping pipes to Pennsylvania, where selling them was prosecutable. Chong took a plea deal to protect his wife and son, and out of 55 people indicted, he was the only one with no prior record who got locked up, 9 months in federal prison, a $20,000 fine, and over $100,000 seized. And the prosecutors said the quiet part out loud, arguing he deserved prison because he used his fame to promote the crime, literally pointing to his stoner movies in court. So the government wasn't just punishing him for the bongs, it was punishing him for being Tommy Chong. He served his time from late 2003 into 2004, where his cellmate for a stretch was a guy named Jordan Belfort, the future Wolf of Wall Street. Cheech called it a total miscarriage of justice, and the bitter punchline writes itself, because the same bongs that sent Tommy Chong to federal prison are sold openly on Amazon today. If anything good came out of it, it's that prison made them brothers again. In 2008, after 25 years apart, Cheech and Chong reunited for the Light Up America tour, joking that they'd simply run out of things to fight about. And their final act has been the sweetest irony of all, because the 2 guys the government treated as a menace became the industry's founding fathers. Tommy launched his Chong's Choice weed brand in 2016, and in 2020, they built Cheech and Chong's cannabis company together, plus a hemp business selling THC seltzers. And by 2025, Forbes reported their combined companies were headed for nearly $100 million in yearly revenue across roughly 1,500 stores in 19 states. Cheech, meanwhile, quietly became the most important collector of Chicano art on earth. Over 700 works rooted in the Chicano art movement. And in 2022, the city of Riverside, California, opened an entire museum around his collection, called, of course, The Cheech. And in 2024, they premiered a documentary called Cheech and Chong's Last Movie, 2 old friends driving through the desert, still bickering, still laughing, closing the book on their own terms. So at the end of the day, Cheech and Chong never marched on Washington, never ran for office, never gave a speech. They just made America laugh at the thing it was told to fear, and the fear never recovered. The country that banned weed with the Marijuana Tax Act now has it legal in nearly half its states. The stoner film the critics trashed sits in the Library of Congress, and the man imprisoned over bongs sells legal weed with his name on the label. 2 broke comedians from a Vancouver strip club genuinely helped change how a nation thinks, 1 joke at a time. So what about you? What's your all-time favorite Cheech and Chong moment? And do you think weed would be where it is today without them? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this one, do me a favor and hit that like button. Subscribe for more deep dives like this one, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.